everybody. Welcome back to Spectrum of Hurdles. I'm Shane.
And I'm Ed.
And our special guest today is author and autism advocate, Jacob Hubbard. Hi, Jacob.
Hi there. How you doing?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Doing great. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, anytime. And we got connected through Carrie Baker, the other author that we interviewed the other day.
That's right.
Yeah. Amazing lady. For those of you who haven't seen that interview, please check that one out. That one is really good. All right. Now, Jacob, my first question is, I know you've written a book called Sounds of Yesterday. I really love that title. So explain a little bit about that book.
Sure, absolutely. It is my debut novel. It is a literary fiction novel. It is a breakup story. It's told from the perspective of an autistic person. It is semi-biographical. It's based on my own lived experience as an autistic person. That was, that experienced special education system in the 90s and 2000s, basically. So a lot of that lived experience is drawn from that. So the story is about two people, Rob and Anna, over the course of 5 years during the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's about Rob as he's processing the end of this 5-year relationship to come to terms with why did it end? What went wrong? Is he to blame? So, and in the process of his reflection on this relationship, it's forcing him to confront his traumas, insecurities, internalized ableism as an autistic adult in today's world, basically. A lot of the book explores themes related to internalized ableism, like I said, but also explores themes related to loss and grief, love and loss through a neurodivergent perspective. So what the book explores is issues related to, self-advocacy, your identity as an autistic person, neurodiversity, and how that affects the way we relate to each other. It also explores themes related to empathy, what empathy looks like through a neurodivergent perspective, and all that stuff. So that a lot of the book explores those issues about empathy, what empathy looks like, and how we come to terms with significant loss and grief through an autistic person's perspective, essentially.
Now,
Yeah, that's really good. I love that. So what percentage, Jacob, of that is more you than the character?
If I had to put a number, I would say about 85 to 95% of it is me.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah,
Now,
obviously, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the myths that they say about autistic people is we all lack empathy.
Which is
what do you
not
mean
true
by
at all. Not true at all. I would actually argue that autistic people in general tend to have so much empathy that we don't know what to do with it.
Right.
And that can sometimes be detrimental depending on the context. Like sometimes we have so much empathy, you end up like not having an effective way to lay out boundaries when you're being taken advantage of by other people, basically. So that's something that could be a challenge or a struggle for sure, but the actual idea that, autistic people don't have empathy is just not true at all, as this book explores that idea.
Right.
So what advice do you have for any up and coming writers that are neurodivergent?
My advice would definitely be just to write. Like if you have an idea and you're passionate about that idea, don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because like your voice, your story is just as valuable as anyone else. And if you have a story to tell and you want to tell it, do it. That's the way I would say it.
Yeah, that's really true. I've contemplated writing a book for many years now. It may not manifest in the form of a book, but maybe a writing project like a script, like a movie script, because I'm heavily into movies. And I've always thought one day, hey, what's that one story that I could really resonate with, that I could like visually show? I mean, writing is great, but I like to really be more visual with things. And I think a script and a movie would be ideal for me.
I 100% agree with that. If you want to write a script, but you want to write a TV show, and that's your passion, do it. I know for some autistic people, they tend to be much more visual, and then I'm like that too. Like I tend to visualize a lot of things in my head, and I try to do the best I can to translate that onto the page. Now, one of the things I try to do that with my own writing was, and when I especially did in this book, is that one of the things I've done to help try to visualize the thought process of an autistic person is, like, from Rob as the main character, when he's trying to process grief and trauma or memories or all that stuff, he always imagines himself on a visual stage. And I do that throughout the book to help visualize to the reader what the thought process of a neurodivergent mind is like, essentially.
Okay.
And it's kind of ironic that you would say about, you know, people not telling you. I'm actually writing a book called Thank You for Telling Me No, because the people who've told me no in my life, they're the ones who have inspired me to keep going. If I had just did nothing in life, or if they didn't say anything in life, I probably wouldn't have done anything. But I am a stubborn little son of a bee, and yeah, I've always wanted to write.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel you have more problems with people accepting you as an autistic writer, or yourself accepting you as an autistic writer?
Can you repeat that question again? I didn't quite catch all that.
A lot of people think autistic people aren't equal to whatever to neurodivergent people. So a lot of times they won't accept the writings from autistic people, but I mean, I know that's not true at all. What I'm wondering is, do you have more either self-doubt or doubt from others? And how do you eliminate all those doubts?
I would say I have more self-doubt than doubt from other people, because I know I get, at least from close circle of friends of mine and family members who actually do read samples of my writing, because I've always been a writer. This is actually, you know, I've always enjoyed reading and writing. I have like hundreds of books in my room, like a huge collection of them as well. And I always enjoyed writing short stories and all that stuff, you know, poems and novels and all that stuff. But I always had self-doubt as well, because, like, again, even when I was writing, I always like, this is as good as I hope to be. It's not as good as I want it to be. And I'm always doubting myself, even though I'm always told by other people, yeah, it's not as great, blah, 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 blah. But I just kept going with this particular book because I had a story to tell, and I was grieving, because the story is about grief, and it is based on an actual event that I went through in my life, and I just depicted that on the page. So when I have all that self-doubt, I just push through, because when I was writing as of yesterday, grief was the biggest motivator for me to keep writing.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, excuse me. Let's talk a little bit more about grief. So Ed and I's story, we lost both parents at a younger age, and we kind of went through that end of the spectrum of grief. So I guess this is kind of a two-parter. If you have lost anybody, like, how does that grief compare to the breakup grief?
For me, and to answer that question, for me, in my brain, there's just no difference. My brain processes grief the same. Like, if you say the loss of a loved one through death and all that stuff, my brain cannot tell the difference between grief from that versus grief from a breakup, basically. Because in my mind, they're the same, essentially. So my argument in the book is that the grief from a breakup is no different from the grief of someone who passed away. So, like, without going to particular spoilers of the book, Rob, the character, has gone through significant grief in his life: the loss of his father, loss of people he's known, all that stuff, through death and tragedy, and that translates into losing a connection, a bond with someone he's been with for 5 years of his life, essentially. So my argument in the book is that when we try to compartmentalize grief through that way, it ends up downplaying how heartbreaking losing a partner really is, because, like, in today's society, when we think of grief, we think of, like, oh, they broke up, therefore, yes, it's sad, but they'll move on. But when your brain, your thought process, it doesn't see it that way. When you lose a loved one through death, yes, that's horrible, that's sad, that's tragic, and you have to mourn that. But when you go through a breakup, especially through a significant relationship, your brain cannot tell the difference between whether or not they actually died or not, because it's the same thought process.
I gotcha. Yeah, grief in itself is very complicated, especially for those that are neurotypical, but you put someone on a spectrum, it's like a double spectrum right there because they're like so different. It's very interesting. Ed and I did a talk at a conference back in January about the whole grief process and how unique it is for everybody, even those on the spectrum.
Absolutely, 100%. And my goal with this book is to help to depict that. And also kind of a personal thing as well. It was like me trying to process significant grief as well. Grief of losing a partner, grief of losing a stable childhood, grief of losing people in my family that were important to me, grief of being seen as someone who had value, basically. Again, when you think about grief, there's so much that unpacks that. And then we talk about a breakup story as what this book is focusing on. Like, there's so much grief in regards to that, because not only you're losing an end of a partner, but it's also reopening past grief as well, and if you don't process that throughout your life, that can really hurt you in the long run. And that's why telling these type of stories are so important.
Yeah, or if it's even unhealed from the past, it can still creep up on you.
Absolutely. It can creep up on you when you even least expect it too, because grief comes at you that way. And I would actually argue that this book as well is kind of like a trauma narrative rather than just a typical breakup story. Because when we think of like typical breakup stories, we think, oh, these two people broke up. One partner may move on. They might find another partner. Yes, the story starts with a breakup story, but it kind of unravels and goes in directions as to exploration of what grief looks like through a neurodivergent perspective, but also exploring what happens when you don't process your trauma for so many years. It is a trauma narrative.
Yeah, and I think the world needs more awareness on that topic. So again, thank you for writing this book, and I'm definitely going to purchase a copy, and I really want to dive, of course, more into that. My next question is, as you know, the group Ed and I run is called Hurdle. So I like to ask everybody on the show this question: what is the biggest hurdle you have encountered in your entire writing journey, and how do you, I guess another two-parter, how do you manifest those into words?
Do you mean in terms of like just getting writing done or getting it out there? Is that what you mean?
I guess getting writing done. Yeah, let's go with that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a full-time professor at San Diego State University. I teach business writing and all that stuff. So part of the challenge of just getting writing done is working around that schedule, basically. So the challenge is just trying to find time to do what I really love, which is writing, but also teaching as well. That's a massive challenge there.
Yeah, I get it. Just timing of everything and trying to make things work.
I have a question. You say you do a lot of writing. Another one of the myths that's on the autism spectrum is Auspies don't really have a grasp of humor. Have you ever done any?
That's comedy? Definitely not.
Yeah.
I never done comedy myself, but when I'm like with friends, we have like inside jokes that we have, or we'll troll each other on Facebook or whatever the case would be, but to say we don't have humor is just silly,
Or we have a different humor that people don't understand. Because we do things in different ways.
Yeah, sometimes we have really dark humor, which I won't share on this program, but you get what I mean,
Yeah, like things that I find funny, like normal person may not find funny at all.
Exactly.
So Jacob, I understand you have your own publishing company called Seaside Publishing. Explain a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I decided to go the independent route for this book and to start my own publishing company because I wanted to have complete creative control over my writing. And I do plan to write other books as well, which I won't go into in this interview because again, that's still in the work in progress right now. But I wanted to keep my own brand identity when it comes to the way I approach writing. And I realized after writing the first draft of this book that in order for me to keep creative control of my ideas was to start my own company, and that's what I did.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know a lot of not only with writing, but music, a lot of executives out there would want more creative say over what you put out.
Right. And also as well, I wanted to protect the book as well, because like this book is very raw, as any reader who has read the book already, is that it doesn't compromise in terms of its emotional honesty. It doesn't compromise on its identity as a neurodivergent story. It is a neurodivergent story told warts and all, and it doesn't sanitize or sugarcoat its actual palatability of Rob as a character. Again, what you see is what you get with Rob. It's about can you take the time to put down your emotional blind spots just to understand where he's coming from. So to give you like a point of reference as to the approach I took with his character, without going to specific spoilers, there's a book that I've read a while ago. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. I don't know if you read that book, but it's about a woman who is basically went through a lot of trauma in her life. And at the start of that book, we don't really get, we're kind of put off by her a little bit. We kind of judging her a little bit until we get to learn more and more about her as the novel progresses. This novel, Sounds of Yesterday, takes a very similar approach where you're kind of just seeing Rob as he is, as like, as how many neurotypicals in our society tend to view autistic people, like on a surface level, projection. Like they'll see like, oh, he's acting self-centered, or he's engaging in weird behavior or stuff like that. But as you get to know Rob more and more, it's starting to peel layers and layers of those those assumptions about his character, to a point where, wait, am I judging him way too quickly the way our neurotypical society does? It's something to think about.
Yeah.
What
Do
is
you have any? Okay, go
yeah?
ahead.
What is one of the biggest hurdles that a small business owner with autism that you would actually see in your life?
I'm just trying to figure out how everything works, because like there's a lot of like rules and regulations, especially like when it comes to like LLCs, for example, how tax purposes work. That's all complicated and get overwhelming very quickly, for sure. It's just learning from trial and error and trying to figure out everything. Thankfully, I have people in my life who definitely help with that, for sure. But it's definitely been a hurdle, for sure.
Yeah.
You're an inspiration to us, because I know a lot of people with autism would be scared to run their own business, and you're definitely an inspiration to all of us.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So in terms of your writing career, what is next for you?
Well, I am still writing another book, which again, I'm not gonna reveal what that is right now, but you can definitely follow me on Instagram or my website when I give some, periodic updates about what I'm doing and all that stuff. I'm hoping my next book would be a radical genre shift, which again, I won't reveal what that is right now, but I'm hoping to do something a little bit different, but still within the same thematic ballpark as Sounds of Yesterday. It's kind of like a thematic companion piece, for lack of a better term.
Nice. Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think yes. So do you ever plan on speaking at any conferences by any chance?
I hope to in the future. I'm still kind of working out every to go. I am going to different book festivals around the country. I'm going to one in Pittsburgh by the end of this month. I'm going to one in Chicago in September for the Printers Rose Lit Fest. Yeah, just going where the opportunity goes. And if anyone wants to, have me speak at a panel, I'm more than happy to do that and talk about this book or anything, issues related to neurodiversity and literature. That's something I would love to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ed, would you want to invite Jacob to speak with us or do something at some point? Because we talk on grief.
Absolutely. We've been trying to go like every 3 or 4 months to a conference where we speak at. We're going to be speaking at one coming up in June. And we would love to have you join us at one of those conferences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you tell me more about that. I'd like to see if they work with my schedule. I would love to do something like that.
Awesome.
Excellent. Now, do Is there a difference writing where no one can see you compared to speaking about what you're doing in front of a crowd?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you rephrase it?
A lot of people find it easier to write because it's just them in the room alone. They can get all their
Mhm.
feelings out, whatever. How do you, what advice can you give to make it easier to get those feelings out into a crowd?
Oh, okay, gotcha. Difference between writing and speaking. I definitely struggle with speaking for sure, you know, because I know me personally growing up, being verbal was always a struggle for me. You know, I always preferred writing because writing was a lot easier for me to get my thoughts out. In terms of us just getting it out there, for me, I just did a lot of practice, just public speaking. And as a teacher, that, you know, when I teach classes constantly, that's something I had to learn to practice more and more thoroughly, you know. And in terms of like what advice I would give, I don't think there's anything wrong with having note cards or having like something written down on paper in preparation. It's always a good idea to have something prepared, you know, for sure.
Yes. Like for me, for this one, I normally don't write stuff down, but I really wanted to ask you a few different things that are specific, so I wrote them down on like a prompter thing over here.
Absolutely.
Now,
Absolutely.
as a professor, do your students know you're autistic? And if so, do they respect you?
Most of them do, and most of them do respect it, yes. Some just don't care.
That's a big step up. And that was a hard thing growing up, was getting respect from people who knew you were autistic. When I'm 56, we didn't even know what autism was. And when I first got diagnosed, a lot of people just shunned me for being autistic. And it's so great to see that they respect me for that.
Yeah, we definitely made a lot of progress for sure, you know, because I know when I was younger, I was diagnosed with Asperger's, which they would call autism today now with all that stuff. But growing up in the special ed environment for literally 16, 17 years of my life, that was pretty traumatic in of itself, which again, that's a whole can of worms. We don't have to go into that right now because the book kind of already does that, you know?
Yeah, and Ed, to expand on what you were saying, I've never seen The Good Doctor, but based off of what you said, there's people in the show who are like, oh, well, he's autistic. I don't want him working on my brain.
Yeah.
That's dumb.
Yeah.
And what I love about the show is they don't sugarcoat it. They don't say, oh, he's fine, you know, he's great, we're going to love him normal. They bring out the bad side, which is a lot of realism. They bring out the fact that a lot of people won't trust that. And I really appreciate that. Because sugarcoating doesn't help either.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, I try not to sugarcoat with this book at all. Like again, there are a lot of places in Sounds of Yesterday where it gets raw, it gets real. It may make some readers uncomfortable a little bit. It goes into places where it may make some readers like debate the content of the themes. What's the idea? That's the idea. I want to challenge readers to really think about what empathy looks like through a neurodivergent perspective. You know, and not just, oh, he's autistic, therefore he has no empathy. There's a lot more to it than that. Also exploring what trauma looks like through that lens, and not just trauma in the sense of, oh, he survived a car accident or he survived war. We're talking about more like the smaller, less noticeable aspects of trauma that people go through, like you know, like CPTSD that some people have described, where trauma it happens not just from one major event, but through a series of smaller micro aggressions that happen, where a person experiencing so many years of that type of you know, event that causes them to feel like, oh, am I worthless? Am I not good enough? Or am I just never going to be as smart as everyone else? Again, a lot of like people who experienced special ed in the 90s and 2000s, where they experience this type of infantilization of neurodivergent students, or they experience this type of institutionalized trauma that many people who are neurotypical don't always see or understand, because they think, oh, they had a bad experience in school, that therefore wasn't as bad. But when you compound that with the microaggressions, with the infantilization, misuse of IEPs, for example, how that compounds throughout most of your life, the emotional, educational neglect that can happen with neurodivergent students from that time period, it adds up and it can really affect you as you go into your adult life. And what I found with a lot of like neurodivergent stories that people have, a lot of the focus is on like autism in kids, which is valid, don't get me wrong, but they're going to grow up to be adults someday. What about stories about them, you know?
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely, most autistic stories I've seen are based on kids. And there's, especially with the people coming out these days who are adults, and now they're saying almost 1 in 10 or 1 in 9 people are autistic and don't even know it. So they definitely need more information for adults.
I agree. And even with programs over here in the Orlando area, a lot of them are only centered towards children and families. Like, where's, children are not the only ones on the spectrum, What happens when they get older? Like, don't they ever think about that?
Right.
And a lot of people are new to the spectrum, or not new to the spectrum, they're new to being diagnosed with the spectrum, and they don't know exactly how to handle a lot of things. We're basically kids on the spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hoping stories like what I wrote there would help provide a gap there. And also looking at how mental health affects relationships too,
Yeah.
That's a big key. It's hard. I don't see a lot of autistic people dating. I know there are out there, and there isn't a lot of information about it. I just read recently that there is an autistic dating app out there now. But last year we interviewed Danny Bauman, who's from Love in the Spectrum, and that really, really, I think, opened the eyes to a lot of people on autistic love.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Well, Jacob, thank you for being on our show. And as always, anytime. And
thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll be in touch, and we'll definitely spread the word about your book, and then we'll go from there.
Go from there. Thank you I love talking about this book. I look forward to hearing from you all again, and I hope more people read this book, because to me, this story has been a labor of love for me, and I want to spread this book to as far as wide as I possibly can,
Absolutely.
For all you viewers out there, we thank you for watching this video, and if you like what you see here, please subscribe, push the notification button, and spread the word of our channel to others.
All right, Jacob, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see ya.